Anna has asked from Hungary, and she is quoting from the Sukhmani Sahib. Gauri Sukhmani, 5th Mahal. जब मुश्किल होवई अत भारी, हर को नाम खी माही उधारी, अनिक पुनः चरण करत नहीं तरई, हर को नाम कोत पाप परहरी. When the obstacles are so very heavy, the name of the Lord shall rescue you in an instant. By performing countless religious rituals, you shall not be saved. The name of the Lord washes off millions of sins. Pranam Acharya ji. All throughout the scriptures, it is reiterated that the name of God should be spoken, praised, chanted and worshipped. How can we ensure that doing this will not turn into some sort of religious ritual? In other words, what differentiates religious rituals from what Guru Nanak is encouraging us to do? Guru Nanak Sahib is not encouraging you, Anna, to do anything specific or anything in particular. He is asking you to live sincerely and carefully. What does it mean to remember or chant the name of the Lord? It does not mean anything in particular. It means when the million worldly names cloud your mind, remember how hollow they are. Remember that they are just names and there is nothing that they are pointing to. They are meaningless and baseless. They are just how they are named. They are names. Just names. You see, a name must indicate something, right? When you say a pen must point to the thing called pen. Spirituality is the knack of realizing instantly that the mind lives in names and has no cognition, no faculty for the thing. And that's a dangerous situation, you see. The mind lives in names. The names it knows of. Of the thing, it knows nothing at all. And since it knows nothing of the thing, it takes the name as a proxy for the thing. Therefore, chanting the Lord's name is just a gentle tap on the wrist of all other names. Even when all other names are vying with each other to corner your attention, to dominate your mind, you tell them something else is more important, the name of the Lord. The name of the Lord therefore keeps the importance of the other names in check. If their importance is not kept in check, then those hollow names will become disproportionately powerful upon you. They'll start dominating you, which they don't deserve to do because they are hollow. At the same time, we said the mind has no appreciation for the real thing, all it knows is names. And in the names does it get intertwined. In the names does it get caught and lost. But names are all that the mind can know of. Therefore, a special name is used as an antidote against the plethora of names that otherwise cloud the mind. What is that name? That is the name of the Lord. Remember that the remembrance of the Lord's name is not an affirmative act. It does not mean anything by itself in particular. It is an act in renunciation. It is an act in negation. It is an act in rebellion. You are saying, I don't bother too much about the other names. You are not saying the name of the Lord means too much to me. What you are actually saying is, oh, all these diverse, miscellaneous, attractive names, they do not mean much to me. That is what is meant by continuous remembrance of the Lord's name and the chanting of the Lord's name. This distinction is very important to understand. Otherwise, if the Lord's name is taken to be in the same dimension as the various worldly names that we know of, then the Lord's name just gets added to the repository of the million names we already have. It turns into something very ordinary, something very useless, rather something rather harmful. Now you are asking how to ensure that the chanting of the Lord's name doesn't turn into another ritual. I've already answered that. A ritual is something that you add to your daily routine, don't you? A ritual is something affirmative. It is something additional. It is something incremental. It is something over and above what you are already doing. Whereas chanting the Lord's name is an act in negation. It is an act in subtraction. It is an exercise in realization, negation, deletion. So, you are having a coffee table discussion with a client. And 1,000 names he is dropping to impress you. And there are names of various things. There are names of currencies, there are names of figures, there are names of progress, there are names of various kinds of temptations and fears. And in this instant, you say, it's the Lord's name that's important. You are out of the spell. You have just managed to beat the trap. Are you getting it? How can it be a ritual? A ritual is something definite, positive, well defined. Building something can be a ritual. Taking the Lord's name is an exercise in destruction. How can that be a ritual? Because when you build something, you already have a blueprint. When you build something, it comes from an idea. When you build something, you already know in advance what you are going to build, and therefore it can turn into a ritual. The Lord's name is when you cut down, bring down and demolish what you have built. How can it be ritualistic? To perform a ritual, you must know what the ritual is, right? And the ritual says, do this, do this, do this, do this. That's not how the method of remembrance of the name works. It works differently. It says, in your daily routine, whenever any name starts to dominate you, put it away, cut it down. That's how this method works you. This is a non-method. This is something that just keeps your tendency to be impressed and dominated in check. It cannot turn into a ritual. Try turning it into a ritual. What will you do? The Lord's name is like a sword. You cannot just exercise it. You cannot just dance with the sword. You cannot just rip through the air. There has to be something that appears definitive. And on that definitive thing, the sword has to be applied. Do you get this? The sword by itself means nothing. The sword by itself is just an instrument of negation. No is what the sword stands for. No. This is not real, it must be cut down. That's what the sword stands for. That's how this method works. Anything becomes too much on you, wield the sword. Hack that thing down. In this world, everything has a name. The method works on everything in the world, because if anything is to dominate you, it would dominate you through a name. You would be able to say, this is dominating me, X is dominating me, Y is dominating me. There's nothing in the world that is not a name. There is nothing in the world that is not a name, and there is nothing in the world that is not hollow. Therefore, no name with all its hollowness should be allowed to overpower you. Had chanting of the Lord's name been another affirmative activity, another definite activity, there was a danger, some probability that it could have turned into a ritual. But it is not an exercise in affirmation at all. It is an exercise in negation of Maya. Therefore, it cannot be a ritual. It is to be exercised only when Maya strikes. Okay, tell me, can using a fire extinguisher be a ritual? It cannot be a ritual, because the fire extinguisher is used only when there is fire. Otherwise, the fire extinguisher just happily sits and hangs on the wall. Does it not? For years, it is possible that the fire extinguisher is not needed to be used. It is used only when there is a need. Therefore, it cannot be a ritual. Are you getting this? Having fire in your kitchen can be a ritual. There is the stove in the kitchen, and routinely there is fire. The flame is needed to cook food. That can be a ritual. But can the fire alarm be a ritual? No, the fire alarm works only when the fire has gone out of hand, it has become problematic, it has started going beyond its limits. The name of the Lord is like the fire extinguisher or the fire alarm. It works only when there is a problem. If there is no problem, it is not needed. But as far as we are concerned, there is always a problem. So the name of the Lord is always needed. Therefore, those who gave this method, they also told you that once you are one with the truth, then the name is no more needed. You are the name. You are one with the one who is being named. Therefore, what will you do with the name now? Go to the Upanishads and they tell you, once you are liberated, please drop us, please do not read us anymore. Because we are useful only when there is a need. Otherwise, there is no need to take recourse to us. The name of the Lord just hacks down the unnecessary. It does not build or create anything by itself. Therefore, it cannot be a ritual. Eating food can be a ritual. Taking a medicine cannot be a ritual. The name of the Lord is like a medicine. It is needed only as long as there is a disease. If there is a disease, the medicine will work. Otherwise, the medicine is quite unnecessary. But that must not get you into thinking that we need the medicine only sometimes or selectively. We are chronic patients who are continuously sick. We are continuously sick because time is our sickness. Therefore, we need continuous treatment as well. That continuous treatment is the name of the Lord. It is a great method because it is a non-method.
In the starting, when you were answering the first question, you made one statement, the mind can only know the name, but not the thing in itself.
Oh.
It doesn't have the faculty to know the thing. So who knows the thing? Or is the thing knowable?
There is actually no thing. If you are talking about the things of the world, they actually do not have substance, really speaking. They are just waves in time. They are not things at all. So at most you could say that they are movements, they are processes, they are a flux. There is no thing. For a thing to be called a thing, it must have stability and continuity even for a nanosecond, right? For a thing to be called a thing, it must have existence at least for a nanosecond. What if this is changing every nanosecond? Would you call it a thing then? Then you would call it a process. Then you will say, oh, there is a flux, there is a movement. There is no thing. But out of ignorance, we are assuming that this is something which it is not.
Mind is not structured in that.
Our mind is not structured to see the flux as flux. Just as when you are watching a movie on the screen, you feel as if it is a continuity, whereas it is not a continuity. It is a succession of static frames, but it appears dynamic. Because your eye is not configured, it does not have enough discretion to see the trick, to see through the trick. You know what a video reel is. It is essentially a succession of static pictures. But those static pictures come with a great frequency to you. And the frequency is so much that your eye loses the discerning ability. More than 16 frames come to you per second, and then the eye has no way to know whether it is static or dynamic. Same thing happens with the mind. If the rate of change is quite slow, then the mind thinks that there is no change. And what do we mean by slow and fast? Even that is in reference to our lifetime. You see, because we live for, let's say, 70 to 80 years. So if there is something that changes only in 80,000 years, we say the change is slow. Slow compared to what? My lifetime. So that is why those who have known, they have said, oh, it is all a projection of the self. There is no truth to it. It is all in context of what you take yourself to be. The little insect lives, let's say, only for 2 hours. We say, oh, it has a tremendously short lifetime. Short compared to your lifetime. How do you know it has a short lifetime? Ask the insect. He will say short. What do you mean by short? What do you mean by short? In fact, does there exist an insect outside of your perception? You cannot even know that. You cannot even know. The only proof you have that the world exists is your own perception or the perception of your neighbor. And who is the neighbor? Somebody in your perception. There is no independent proof that the world even exists. Therefore, I am calling it insubstantial. And those things become too heavy upon the mind. Even though the world is actually insubstantial, but the mind attaches name to worldly things. Now the name is there, the thing is not. The thing is either something else or not at all. The thing is either something else or even nothing at all. But the mind attaches a name to something, and behind the name is an image. Behind the name is not a substantial thing. Behind the name is an image. And now the image is being taken as the thing. But the image cannot function as the thing. Therefore, when you require the thing, you fall flat. So there is wife. Behind the name WIFE, there is not a thing, there is an image. And the image has certain characteristics. Now that characteristics belong to the image, so they are imaginary. But we take those imaginary characteristics as not belonging to the image, but as belonging to the thing called wife. Now whose characteristics are those? Of the image. But we then demand those characteristics from the thing that the wife appears to be. Now the thing that the wife appears to be will not be able to match those characteristics. So there will be conflict, and that is the cause of suffering. The world is not what we take it to be. In fact, there is not even proof that there is something called the world or something called the self. Even if there is something called the world, it is at least not what we imagine it to be. But we proceed according to the imaginations, and imaginations will clash with the fact, and when imaginations will clash with the fact, then we get hurt and bruised. I am imagining that the road is smooth, but the road indeed has bumps. So there will be trouble, and that is the trouble of all mankind. Are you getting it?